Reframing is the art of giving some alternative meaning to the same fact, concept, event, or idea so that it fits any chosen narrative.
So if my father approved of it, I don't see it to be that shocking.
But it was shocking.
It was entertaining to me.
To you?
To me.
In the media, we constantly see polarizing views intended solely to frame the mind of the audience who is listening in a certain way. And in this video, we are going to see how you can maintain the frame smoothly in a non-confrontational way, even when somebody is trying to reinterpret everything you say under a negative light.
It was about being yourself and not being ashamed of being different or thinking different. I try and take everyone's ideals, common morals, flip them around, make people look at them differently, question them, so that you're not always taking things for granted.
All right, noble. But why the bizarre get-up? I mean, why the eye, why the nail polish, why the Satan stuff? You're a minister in the Church of Satan, right?
No, not necessarily. That was something earlier. No. It was a friend of mine who's now dead, who was a philosopher that I thought that I learned a lot from. And that was a title that I was given. So a lot of people made a lot out of it.
Yeah, but I mean, look, if you're a reverend
in the Church of
Satan,
I didn't get paid for it.
But why, if you want to get those kids, those lonely kids, and you want them to be able to be creative and burst out of that, why the bizarre presentation, which can be misinterpreted?
I think everybody's got a presentation. Everybody looks a certain way because they want to convey a certain image. You look a certain way because you want people to listen to you in a certain way.
Actually, a lot of the success in being able to reframe something comes from how smooth and polite you can maintain the conversation and the mood of your interlocutor. We are going to dissect what's happening here with the magical linguistics model, and as a reminder, there is a book coming on that model by Christmas 2024. In the meantime, the idea is to maintain the conversation as polite as possible, because if you act confrontational and defensive, the other person is naturally going to respond to you in the exact same way. In the very beginning, what Marilyn Manson is doing here is establishing his frame, his map of the world for the conversation. His arguments are that he's not ashamed of being who he is. He's propelling people to act according to what they want, what they believe to be true, and not according to what others want them to believe. And the first thing the journalist is doing is proposing a first reframe, therefore giving an alternative view, so reinterpreting what he just said, or using one single element to contradict, or in hope to contradict what he just said. So he's using one argument about being a minister of the Church of Satan, which was taken out of context, and it was just one single example, but one single example that suits the narrative of the journalist. And the way Manson is going to reframe this argument here is pretty interesting. First of all, he is appealing to his original intent, reframing therefore that no, he never intended to cause any harm, but that alone would have been way too simple. Instead, he's generalizing to a broader scope, which is called chunking up in the original sleight of mouth model, and by broadening the vision, chunking up to a more general statement, everyone, actually not just me, but everyone is trying to present some image of how they would like to be seen, you included. Those ones are interesting because when you incorporate the potential intent or views or perspective of the person you are interacting with into your statement, into your reframe, it becomes much harder for the journalist to keep arguing on this exact topic, because he was included into the statement, and indeed we all sometimes try to project something that we are not.
You have a stand on sex. You encourage kids to have sex.
No, I don't. I do have a lot of sexual imagery in my performance, but I don't think it's ever encouraging anyone to have sex. I think I just show my own sexuality, but I don't think I've ever really written about having sex or anything like that. But I think that's, again, another thing that parents should be deciding.
Okay, but remember now, a lot of kids don't have parents that really care about them, and those kids tend to gravitate to people like you, who
If a kid asked me, should I have sex, I'd say, how old are you? And I'd say, well, I lost my virginity when I was 16, so there's my inspiration to you.
All right.
And I would have tried sooner, but I just couldn't find any girls that liked me.
you're a pretty well-spoken guy, yet in your records you use a lot of F-word, a lot of swearing and this and that. Again, is it necessary to get your message across to use that kind of language? Is it you use the sexual imagery, you use the shocking physical appearance, you've done some bizarre things on stage, and you use profanity. All of that necessary?
Sometimes. I think sometimes when you're making a point, I don't think that my lyrics are overlaced with profanity, because I myself don't speak using a lot of profanity in normal conversation. But I think when you're making something aggressive and you need to get a point across, if you're angry, sometimes profanity is necessary. It's better to use a curse word than to hurt somebody else, I find.
The next attack of the journalist is to reframe the intent of Marilyn Manson. Therefore, because he has been appealing to his positive intention, then the journalist naturally wants to reframe that intention and explaining that, for example, he's encouraging young kids to have sex too early. Shame on him! In modern debate, that might be referred to as villainization, which is intended to portray an individual, group, idea, or opposing side as inherently evil, malicious, or morally corrupt. It involves exaggerating or misinterpreting the actions, motives, or beliefs of the opponent to undermine their credibility and sway the audience emotionally. The goal is obviously to provoke fear and anger or distrust in the people listening to the argument or the debate, and the secondary gain for someone using that technique to attack somebody else is to prevent rational argumentation and try to get the thing more emotional, to get the person to overreact. To this, Manson is reframing again, maintaining his own frame, explaining that, well, he's talking about his sexuality. Doesn't mean anyone has to obey what he says or do the same thing, and he never said anyone had to be exactly like him. He talked about his experience. But as a counter-attack, the journalist now is trying to plant a new inference in that conversation, explaining that since some kids don't have responsible parents who can educate them properly, then him, Manson, using profanity and the F-word and all of that, is very troubling for the youth today. And he was accusing Marilyn Manson, as well as many other artists or musicians who are propagating Satan messages or stuff like that. That is also a very common strategy used in the media when the journalist is trying to erect himself or herself as a superior, morally superior person. Therefore, anything they say is more valid because they defend the poor victims, so they are morally superior to you, and anything you say is not as valid. Very common tactic, we have seen that many times, especially nowadays. And the response here is pretty smart, because instead of trying to refute that belief and going in direct opposition, which would just cause even more arguments, he is redirecting to a resulting outcome, or like presume the consequence, that if everyone was following the traditional model of bottling up everything and never really speaking out all of those things, then it might end up in getting hurt or getting so much anger built up that somehow it would cause some damage. And obviously here he is referring to his childhood. If you know a bit about his story, he grew up in a very religious, strict conditioning, and he tried to get out of it.
So you don't believe that your songs reflect any kind of suicide wish or anything like that?
No, I feel that my songs talk about getting through feelings like that.
What do your parents think of you?
My parents, you know, at first weren't sure what I was doing. They wanted me to be a writer. I started out as a journalist. I still feel that I am a journalist in a way, because I see things and I report them back to people in my own fashion, in songs or in interviews. My mom was always a big fan of Elvis. She made me listen to Elvis when I was a kid. I hated it, and I think now I've kind of grown up to fill in some of the sort of controversy that he created back in his day, but in a much more extreme, modern sense.
Never before in the history of this country have so many corrupting influences descended upon children at one time. Sure. And that most children don't understand what you're doing and why you're using the F word and why you're acting bizarre. And this can be very, very troubling to children who don't have direction, who don't have responsible parents.
Anything can be misinterpreted. People can look at Christ on a cross and think, this is an image of murder, this is violent, this has sexual imagery in it. And I think it's my job as an artist to be out there pushing people's buttons and making them question everything. And I respect you for challenging me, and that's why I came on the show.
Now the journalist is following Manson's thinking again, saying, okay, so you point out to future consequences, therefore don't you think that your songs reflect or like propel suicidal wishes? In modern debate that might be called the slippery slope argument, where you try to attach one premise, one first cause or one event that happened to a negative consequence, again aimed at disrespecting or removing the credibility of the person you are interacting with. That is attaching A to B, and B being the negative thing I want to plant in your head so that everyone sees you as a bad person. To which Manson stays grounded into his frame, and again, remember, it is all being done in a very polite and smooth way. He's not counter-attacking. He's not trying to remove the credibility of the journalist as a response, which would be just a childish counter-attacks. He's maintaining his frame. He keeps explaining that in his frame, in his map of the world, he's only here helping people getting through feelings like that, instead of trying to propel them to take action about it or take action on it. He's helping them to breathe them out somehow. As a last resort, the journalist is trying to maintain his meta frame that everything that's happening here is within the context of children getting beaten or children not having the parents who can take care of them. Therefore, everything you do is bad because we are in this context. To which Manson is responding with an analogy about Christ on a cross, because again he grew up in a very religious setting, so he's got many examples of how he was affected himself as a child by Christianity, or like the version of Christianity he grew up with. And analogies are a great way to decrease potential aggressiveness or tense feelings during an argument, because you are putting the conscious mind slightly away from the difficult examples or details at hand. And he's concluding once again with his intent. I think, or I feel, it is my job as an artist to make people question what they are taught to believe. As you can see, the main conclusion here is you don't have to be confrontational even when somebody is trying to get you to act confrontational. You can remain polite, smooth, and at some point people who just try to attack, they will just find another victim, because if you don't react to their attacks, they will find somebody else. If you want to start developing those skills, you can download the small document down below called The 7 Steps to Master Sleight of Mouth, which will give you examples of how to articulate all of that depending on the context in life that you have to deal with. And as a final reminder, the magical linguistics model will be incorporated in my upcoming book, coming on Christmas 2024, that will touch upon all of those topics. First of all, using language to heal people from their emotional baggage, and also a bit of political things to explain how to detach from the media narratives in any sort of way, whether it be religious, right-wing, left-wing, whatever you want, just detaching mentally from that to build your own perception based on the beliefs you have chosen and not the ones somebody else has tried to plant into your head. With that being said, thank you for watching. See you next time. You can subscribe in the meantime if you want, and I will see you in the next video.